Welcome to the Adoption and Foster Care Journey, a podcast to encourage, educate, and equip you to care for children and youth through adoption, foster, and kinship care. Hosted by an adoptive mom with over 22 years of kinship and adoptive parenting experience. She's on this journey with you. Please welcome Sandra Flach.
Do you not know that your bodies are the temples of the Holy Spirit who is in you, whom you have received from God? You are not your own. You were bought at a price. Therefore, honor God with your bodies. That is 1 Corinthians 6, verses 19 through 20. I am your host, Sandra Flach. Welcome to the Adoption and Foster Care Journey podcast, where I am here to encourage and equip you for your parenting journey. And I'm on this journey with you as a mom of 8, 5 through adoption, all with trauma, including our 2 young adult sons, both diagnosed with fetal alcohol syndrome. I get it. I know the challenges that come from raising children with trauma histories and prenatal exposure to substances. And my hope is that you will find this podcast an invaluable resource for your journey. And speaking of resources, so excited because my devotional book will be releasing soon. It is called Soul Care Saturday, 52 Devotions for Foster and Adoptive Moms. Stay tuned for details. We're really hoping to release it by the end of November. We're working on it, and I'm excited about it. So stay tuned to learn more on how you can get your copy. And also, you can find all of our adoption and foster care journey resources on the Justice for Orphans website at justicefororphansny.org. Right on the homepage is a big button that says the Adoption and Foster Care Journey. And when you click it, you will find all of the resources that we have, from the podcast to the FASD workshops, the blog, our Hope support community. All of those things are there. So please check it out. There is a link in the show notes to make it super easy for you to find it. And of course, please be sure to also follow us on our new social media pages. The Adoption and Foster Care Journey is on Facebook and also on Instagram as AFC _journey. And you'll find all of our information there as well, because I love to connect with you, our listeners, my very favorite people. And I would love to connect with you in person. And I've already begun adding to my 2026, believe it or not, speaking calendar. So on January 30th through February 1st, I will be at the Field Retreat in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, where I will be leading a breakout session on FASD. I will also be at the church at Brook Hills in Birmingham, Alabama on February 21st, leading a day of FASD training there, and Mobilize, Ohio on March 21st, at the North Canton Chapel, where I will be leading, I believe, 3 breakout sessions. So look for links in the show notes below for these events and anything else coming up that I'll be letting you know. And of course, if you're looking to have me come and speak at your support group or your foster and adoptive parent group or at your church or at your retreat, reach out to me. My direct email is in the show notes below. I would love to come and do an in-person, whether it be a training or a speaking engagement, or if you're even wanting something online, we can do that too. So contact me if you are interested in having me speak at your event. And now today, we have our favorite doctor returning. Dr. Jerrod Brown is with us to unpack another topic vital to our foster and adoptive parenting journeys, the autonomic nervous system dysfunction. We're both going to learn about it, or we're all going to learn about it at the same time, because guys, I'm not really exactly sure the details on this. So I can't wait to dive into this conversation. Dr. Brown has 5 PhDs and specializes in topics related to autism spectrum disorder, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, confabulation, suggestibility, trauma, and other life adversities, alexithymia, executive dysfunction, criminal recidivism, traumatic brain injury, and youth fire setting, like all of the hard things. You can check out his full bio in the show notes below, and you'll find dozens of our bonus episodes featuring Dr. Jerrod Brown on our website. The link is in the show notes, and there's a special section on the website where we keep all of his episodes. So even though if you're listening to this podcast through your regular podcast platform and you're following us there, and thank you very much that you do that. But if you want to find very easily the episodes with just Dr. Brown, we have them all on our website. So you can go there and search through dozens of them and really just dive into he gets into the weeds on all these hard topics, but they're so vital for us to understand them. So without further delay, please welcome Dr. Brown. Hey, Jerrod, welcome back.
Thank you for having me, Sandra. So honored to be here.
Well, our audience loves every conversation that we have with you and your vast knowledge and expertise. So I think the last time we talked, last month's episode was on attachment from a neuroscience lens, which was very well received. And today you're back to tackle another important topic. It's called autonomic nervous system dysfunction. Is that right?
Yeah, we're going to talk about the dysfunction of it, but also like what is it when it's working properly too, and why it's so important when you're raising a child with disabilities to really be aware of this topic.
Yeah, well, tell us what it is. So that's a great place to start.
Well, we all have one. So it's a complex part of the brain. Basically, it's divided into 3 components. And I'm sure if anyone studied trauma, you're aware of the sympathetic nervous system, kind of that fight or flight response. That's a component of this. The parasympathetic nervous system is a component of this. That has been referred to as the rest and digest, where your body's calmer. And then another component of this system that we don't think about enough is the enteroretic nervous system. And what is the enteroretic nervous system? We'll talk about that too, but that's why I do so much work in the area of the gut-brain axis. The enteroretic nervous system is basically the nervous system of our gut. And that is another reason why when the gut is off, the brain's off. When the brain's off, the gut's off. So again, it's that bidirectional chemical highway going on in our brain and our gut. So when the autonomic nervous system is doing what it's supposed to do, so we're in balance, maybe we live a healthy lifestyle, we weren't exposed to chemicals in utero, maybe we didn't have a lot of horrific things happen to us early on in life. Our autonomic nervous system really plays a key role in homeostasis in the body, which basically means it keeps it in balance. So if anybody deals with high levels of depression, anxiety, extreme mood swings, their autonomic nervous system probably is not working properly. It's a really complicated system. There's all kinds of things going on with it. So it relates to our metabolism, circulation issues. So if somebody has a lot of weird circulation issues, especially when they're under a lot of stress, anxiety, worry, burnout, or you can almost feel like in your legs, like the circulation isn't doing what it's supposed to. That's probably related to the autonomic nervous system partially. That's not working at optimal levels. Respiration, body temperature. So if you're one that gets a lot of fluctuations in body temperature, like you just feel so hot, but it's freezing outside, that's a sign that autonomic nervous system might not be in check. Digestion, our circadian rhythms, so our sleep-wake cycle, reproduction, our endocrine health, and the list goes on. As you can see with all these things going on here, the autonomic nervous system really does play a role in so many things in the human body. When we think about the enterotic nervous system, just to kind of give you guys a brief overview, just in case you haven't heard of that. Well, it's part of the gut-brain axis. And if you are working, serving a child, raising a child, interacting with a child who has autism, who has FASD, who has ADHD, lots of behavioral problems, they're probably dealing with autonomic nervous system dysfunction. They're probably dealing with enterotic nervous system dysfunction, which is part of the gut-brain axis, which plays a huge role in mood stability, getting a good night's sleep. And the list goes on and on and on. These are big topics. I don't want to get too far deep in the weeds, but practically speaking, if these systems are not doing what they're supposed to do, the way in which that child regulates, manages, and processes emotions is going to be off. That child's sleep is probably going to be off. So if that child has a ton of sleep issues, and sleep is very complicated, and there's a million things that can make it not work properly. But I would put at the top of the list, I'm not saying it's the only factor, but if you can understand the autonomic nervous system and ways to calm that down, and then also understand the gut-brain axis, you're going to be in a much better position. And sensory perception has a lot to do with this. So if your child has a lot of sensory issues, they may work with a sensory processing specialist or like an occupational therapist. It's really imperative, I think, for those professionals to also understand these particular topics. Sandra, I'll stop there for a moment before I get into like signs and symptoms, red flag indicators that maybe your child has this going on.
Yeah, gosh, my wheels are turning and I've got lots of thoughts, but like would a super simplified picture of this be, for example, a kiddo who, like, I always think of the word hangry, right? Any of us, right? If we're hungry, right? We're really hungry, we haven't eaten, we can get cranky, right? So we use that word hangry. Our kids can also tend to, I was speaking with one mom who her daughter who has an FASD diagnosis and trauma has and it's partly probably sensory related also. Maybe it is that interoception where she doesn't recognize she's hungry, but her little one is a very fussy eater, like eats barely anything, right? She's very fussy. She might get into like where she's eating one thing, right? So that there's one
Yeah.
thing that she will accept. And that only lasts for just so long. And then she doesn't want that. So mom's super concerned about her getting nutrition because she's not eating enough. But yet then there is a lot of meltdowns and a lot of rages and, curious that they could be related, right? Because maybe the child doesn't recognize, oh, I'm hungry. But mom has recognized a pattern to where on the days that she can get some nutrition into her, there's less raging, there's less meltdowns. Am I on the right
Yeah,
track?
well, absolutely. There's so many things that can contribute to this, including that meal skipping, blood sugar issues. If you just look at the fetal alcohol spectrum disorder literature, it does say prenatal alcohol exposure contributes to autonomic nervous system dysfunction. So then how does that play out in your day-to-day life? Well, it indicates that that child or teenager or adult with FASD, and you can place whatever disorder or diagnosis in front of that, ADHD, autism, ODD, the list goes
A lot
on.
of our kids have all of those things, right?
Absolutely, definitely. Well, what that will look like is they probably are going to have much more difficulty handling stress. And it could be good stress, like going to a birthday party, but there's a lot of things going on there. It's overwhelming. Noisy environments, crowds, all that can be very stressful. Even the reduced ability to handle criticism could be a sign of autonomic nervous system dysfunction. Extreme fluctuations in fear responses. So maybe that child is afraid of everything and they're just so worried. But on the flip side of that, you may have some children that can come off as almost callous, where they don't seem to have a fear response, elopement behavior, wandering out into traffic. Punishment doesn't seem to faze them. Look to the autonomic nervous system. It may shed some light and some additional clues on what could be going on there. In the FASD literature and autonomic nervous system dysfunction, it does talk about that child may have a reduced ability to notice cold or hot, so that in the wintertime, maybe that child goes outside in a short sleeve shirt and shorts and it's freezing outside, but that child just doesn't pick up the fact. That could be a sign that that autonomic nervous system might not be working properly. Fatigue is a huge factor when we're talking about this. So if that child, teenager, or adult seems to have a really unusual presentation of fatigue, or maybe you're talking to that child and they seem so alert for the first few minutes, and then all of a sudden you can't even wake them up. Something in the autonomic nervous system could be off there, which definitely could play a role. Overeating, undereating, like hunger cues can be impacted by this. Bedwetting definitely is a factor in this as well. There's so many different things, even chronic constipation and insomnia. When the autonomic nervous system isn't working properly, these are all things that can definitely present to that family system. So very important to work with healthcare providers who truly understand these topics.
Wow. So you basically have been giving us some of the symptoms that would indicate that there could be an autonomic nervous system dysfunction going on. Are there more than that? Is there more to add to
Yeah,
that?
million more. Yeah. So basically, when you think about autonomic nervous system dysfunction, a term you'd want to be aware of is dysautonomia, which is just a term that you'll find in the literature that indicates that the autonomic nervous system is not working properly. So if you look deep in the weeds in terms of the signs and symptoms that may present with autonomic nervous system dysfunction, persistent anxiety, racing thoughts, so you might have a lot more rumination going on. And in the trauma literature, it does talk about when you become trauma informed, it's really important to become autonomic nervous system informed, because if that child is dealing with a lot of prenatal or early childhood trauma and fractured attachment patterns, the overwhelming majority of those individuals is going to have autonomic nervous system dysfunction, brain fog, concentration issues, sensitivity to light, touch, sound, frequent headaches, migraines. So you're listening to this and you have a history of migraine. There's a lot of research literature that says autonomic nervous system dysfunction in conjunction with HPA axis dysfunction, the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, really does play a role in a lot of stress related symptoms that can trickle down into having more migraines and headaches, more dizziness. So if you're one that gets up a lot, like you're sitting on the couch and you get up and you're just so wobbly and dizzy, that's an autonomic nervous system issue in some level. Digestive health problems, panic disorders, post-traumatic stress disorder, and the list goes on. If you know folks with those diagnoses and many, many more, there's plenty of research that shows that the autonomic nervous system is not working at optimal levels.
Wow. I feel like you've described several of my adopted children, and I'm sure our listeners are like, yes, yes, this sounds very, very familiar. What, it sounds like probably because of the prenatal exposure, because of trauma, because of all of those things, you know, autonomic nervous system dysfunction is probably more prevalent among the population of our kids in the foster adoption community. Would that be a fair assumption?
Yeah, I feel safe saying that. Yeah, the more trauma someone's had in their life, the more fractured attachment patterns, the more chaos. That's not good for our autonomic nervous system. So let's pretend your child you adopted or you're a foster care parent And we know the majority of those children, unfortunately, do have histories of trauma.
Right.
What will that look like? How will that present? So you have a child with trauma and autonomic nervous system dysregulation, overstimulated, becoming very overstimulated really easily is probably going to be something that it's going to look like. The reduced ability to self-soothe and calm down. And I'm just working on a case earlier this week as a female with FASD. Extreme emotions, just crying and crying and crying, but no one really knows why this person was crying. She just couldn't connect the dots. The inability to calm down.
Mhm.
High levels of anxiety, lots of anger control problems, a ton of restlessness, lots of panic, worry, catastrophizing, and a lot of hyperactivity. Oh, most of these kids look like they have ADHD or do have ADHD, but if you peel back the layers and look at it from a neuroscience lens, the autonomic nervous system is not working properly. And there's a million other factors going on as well. What happens if that person is consuming a ton of caffeine or sugar or highly processed foods? That's not good for our autonomic nervous system. Cigarettes, nicotine, not good. Body positioning, that's interesting. So if you are listening to this and your child has a lot of body posture issues, there's some interesting research on working with that child to get proper body posture and work on breathing too. A lot of these kids don't breathe properly, or it's shallow breathing, rapid breathing. That's not good as well. Certain kinds of food sensitivities, food allergies, and even you'll find in this literature, which is very interesting, even wearing very tight clothing could throw off our autonomic nervous system. Dehydration. So if that child doesn't drink a lot of water and they're just drinking a lot of soda, energy drinks, those kind of things, any kind of stress can impact this without a doubt. Certain medications, too hot of temperatures being outside, or maybe you're living in a house, the air unit goes out and it's so hot in there. These are triggers for dysautonomia and amongst many, many more.
Wow. I mean, I feel like it's, when I train for, FASD, a lot of the symptoms, right, that like it sounds like almost every symptom that would be a primary symptom of FASD is connected to the autonomic nervous system, right?
A ton are, yes. So you can have the hyperarousal nervous system where it's really go, restlessness, impulsivity. But on the flip side, you could have an autonomic nervous system that has kind of hypofunctioning where it's really slow and sluggish. And that can look like inattentiveness. That can look like just unusual emotional dysregulation, irritability, where that person has a lot of emotion, but they come off very, very slow and sluggish. You can have both going on, and it gets complicated without a doubt. And the more trauma that child has had, the more likely they're going to have imbalances in this. So if your child has a ton of behavioral problems, a ton of concentration issues, just really a bad temper, they just fly off the handle. They go from 0 to 60 in a second, and no one can figure out what in the world just happened here. If that child has an anxiety disorder, PTSD, depression, bipolar disorder, an eating disorder, personality disorder, autonomic nervous system dysfunction is very common among people with those presentations or diagnoses, the research says.
Sandra Flach, host of the Adoption and Foster Care Journey podcast, and FASD educator Debbie Raymond, invite you to join Hope for the FASD Journey, a virtual support community for parents and caregivers raising individuals with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, diagnosed or not. This faith-based support community meets online 3 times each month, features special VIP guests, and a private Facebook group for members only, which includes Soul Care Saturday video devotionals led by Sandra and Deb. Both Sandra and Deb are adoptive moms raising kids with FASD and facilitators of the Facets Neurobehavioral Model. For details and to register, visit justicefororphansny.org/hope-community. That's justicefororphansny.org/hope-community.
So, Jerrod, there's so much here to unpack, but how is it diagnosed? Like, is there a way to get, autonomic nervous system dysfunction diagnosed? And if there is a way to diagnose it, like, what is the treatment? What do parents and caregivers do?
And I didn't get in the weeds. There are specific autonomic nervous system disorders out there. There's a lot of them. That's heavy duty medical. I don't want to open that can of worms, but when we talk about the symptom presentation, most of your kids are probably going to be having the symptoms, which co-occur with so many things. If you're a parent and you're dealing with a ton of burnout again, you're dealing probably with autonomic nervous system dysfunction. Now, if it's a child with FASD, that's a different ballgame because of the structural things going on in the brain from the prenatal alcohol exposure. But in terms of diagnosing this, there are specific tests out there if somebody did truly have a disorder that fell under this umbrella. Medical doctors sometimes have training in this. There's not a lot out there in terms of medical doctors that advertise themselves as autonomic nervous system dysfunction experts or dysautonomia, but you can Google that, you will find some. There's a lot of things we can do about this. Solid, secure, attachment-based relationships help regulate the autonomic nervous system. So your child comes to you at birth, and they've been exposed to a lot of drugs or alcohol in utero. That child probably is going to have some feeding problems, eating problems, hyperarousal issues, gut problems, irritability, sleep issues. What can you do about it? Well, the attachment relationship is a big part. Love, kindness, keeping things regulated, all the things that we've talked about in some of the other episodes we've done together. So attachment, big thing to be aware of. Another thing that comes up in this literature, and you and I have done a talk on this previously, is alexithymia. Yeah. A very high percentage of your kids and teenagers with some of these backgrounds probably are dealing with alexithymia, which is emotional blindness, where that child has a hard time naming, labeling, making sense, and expressing emotions. If that's the case, target that with intervention. So it could be equine therapy, music therapy, play therapy, having a therapist who understands these things, using feelings charts, making things visual, not just talking about the emotion, but making examples, showing videos, color stories, picture books, things of that nature, helping that child learn how to express emotions can be very helpful. A lot of common sense things to be aware of too, to help regulate this and calm this down, is good eating. Nutrition does play a role here, without a doubt. Really taking a look at what you eat. Obesity plays a role here. If somebody's obese, you will find several studies that have found that obesity and autonomic nervous system dysfunction do co-occur. If that child has a lot of sleep issues, or even snores, or has full-blown obstructive sleep apnea, get that tested, get that treated. That can calm down the nervous system, without a doubt. In the intervention literature for dysautonomia, it talks about the need for a holistic approach. And if you've heard me talk before for Sandra's podcast, you know I talk a lot about the importance of using holistic and integrative approaches. Basically, what that means is we're working from a multidisciplinary lens, and we're working with all kinds of providers. So we all know if you're raising a child with FASD, they probably have a team of providers. If they don't have a team of providers, they probably need a team of providers. therapists, social workers, skills workers, workers for the family, nutritionists, all of these things. The same with dysautonomia, having that holistic approach and holistic mindset can be very, very helpful. And again, most of this is very common sense, but if you look at what are the things that can help bring balance back to the nervous system. So we want to move away from that sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight response, and bring it back to the parasympathetic nervous system response. What do we do about that? Good rest. So it's not just good sleep, but being aware if somebody's go, 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 go all day long, they don't take a minute to breathe, they skip meals all the time, that's not good. Exercise. And I'm not saying going out and running a marathon, but even daily walking and yoga, great research on that. Whatever we can do to learn better stress management skills. Stress is unavoidable, but we don't want it to reach the point of toxic stress. Meditation is very, very helpful. Deep breathing. How often do any of us just sit during the day and really be aware of our breathing? I know I don't. So slowing down, taking more deep breaths, finding a good therapist, setting good boundaries is very helpful too. The last thing we want to do is say yes to everything and overcommit. That's a struggle for a lot of people. Multitasking, not good. Create balance, slow down. Those are a few things, Sandra, that can help.
Yeah, like you said, there's so many sort of like common sense things that we can do. It, often for our kids boils down to rest and good sleep and nutrition. Um, a lot of those, all natural approaches really can improve a lot of things. And, we talk about all these different things, but a lot of these things.
Huge. And that's why I love lifestyle medicine approaches. I've given many talks on that. You can Google lifestyle medicine. There's 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine. Getting good sleep, exercise, nutrition, being around positive people, reducing or avoiding harmful chemicals, all of those things. Lifestyle medicine based approaches, I think, can be so helpful and they compare so nicely with trauma informed care, attachment based approaches. And when you do that simultaneously, I do believe it can lead to way better outcomes for you and your family and your child.
Yeah. Now, Jerrod, are there resources out there? Like if this is really resonating with one of our listeners, can we Google, are there books written on the autonomic nervous system? Is there literature out there, something if they want to do some further reading or research?
You will have so many resources. If you just type in the autonomic nervous system, if you type in dysautonomia, you're going to find so much out there. There's so many websites. You go to YouTube, there's so many short videos. You go to Amazon or wherever you get your books from, just type in the nervous system. You'll find a ton of stuff. And the autonomic nervous system is only one component. And under that, there's other umbrellas and stuff. But when we study the nervous system, it's very, very important to understand the central nervous system as well, which they go hand in hand. And when you're studying this too, as I mentioned earlier, it's so important to understand the gut-brain axis and the enteroretic nervous system. It gets complicated. It gets overwhelming because there's literally thousands and thousands, if not tens of thousands of studies that have been published on these topics over the last 100 years or more. But start slow, and today is a good starting point. By no means is this even 1% of the information out there in the autonomic nervous system, but I think it's a good foundation to start with and build on. But the takeaway point here is if you're an adoptive parent, you're a foster care parent, the overwhelming majority of the children you love and raise have an autonomic nervous system that probably is not working at optimal levels because of the prenatal and early childhood kinds of trauma, chemical exposure, attachment problems.
Yeah, that totally makes sense to me. And everything that you were describing, like I said, I felt like you were describing my kids. So for our parents listening, because there's a lot, like we just probably barely scratched the surface, right? Um, what would be if you just listed off a few simple things that parents could start doing today that they could apply at home, um, with our kids if they're suspecting, this autonomic nervous system dysfunction. What are some things we could just start doing today that could help improve things, whether or not, because of the FASD, because of the trauma, because of all of the things? It sounds like some of these, things that we could do would help with all of the above, right?
For me personally, what is the number one thing that throws off my autonomic nervous system that I can really feel? Too much screen time exposure, especially at night. So reduce screen time exposure and get off the gadgets in the evening. That's one practical area. Plenty of research says that going for a daily walk can help kind of shift the balance of your autonomic nervous system from that sympathetic component and shift it gradually to the parasympathetic nervous system response. And again, I'm not giving medical advice here. Make sure it's okay with the doctor if there's any issues, healthcare, things like that. But a daily walk, even if it's 5 or 10 minutes, it doesn't have to be huge. That can play a very, very huge role. And one more thing for all of us just to think about, compassion can help calm the nervous system down. Self-compassion, being nice to yourself, cutting yourself slack. If you made a mistake as a parent, be nice. Teach your children how to forgive, how to be nice to themselves, really work on self-esteem and reducing shame and all of those things can actually play a huge role in calming our autonomic nervous system down.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm so glad that you brought up the screen time, right? Because I feel like that has been, um, there's great positives that come with all of that, but for our kids especially, it's a detriment in so many ways, including, at night. I see it with myself. If I've had an evening of Zoom calls or screen time, or if I'm just scrolling, I have a harder time falling asleep and I don't get good sleep. So I've resorted to, I cut off the device by a certain time and then I go to bed with a book or a crossword puzzle, just something so that my brain is ending on that as opposed to a screen. And whether it be parents and especially our kids, that's one simple practice we can start applying that would just improve so many things.
Cannot agree more, 100%.
Yeah, gosh, we could go on forever on this topic, I'm sure, Jerrod. But as we wrap up, any last thoughts? Anything else that you want to make sure that we talk about regarding this subject?
Become trauma informed, but part of that, learn about attachment, learn about sleep, learn about the gut, learn about the autonomic nervous system. You'll be in a way more informed and holistic approach to your parenting. And I think it'll lead to better outcomes. And professionals who are listening to this, you cannot go wrong learning as much as humanly possible about the autonomic nervous system. Because if you are providing services to folks with trauma histories, neurodevelopmental disorders, chronic health problems, substance use issues, serious mental health problems, the bulk of your clients are dealing with this.
Yeah, such eye-opening information, and I greatly appreciate, Jerrod, you as always, you just dive into such important topics for us, especially foster and adoptive parents. Can't wait to have you back on in January, where we're going to continue our conversations. Thank you so much again for being with us today.
You're welcome. Thank you, my friend. I appreciate it.
And thank you for listening to this episode that we brought to you with Dr. Jerrod Brown. If you enjoyed my conversation, we have several past interviews with Dr. Brown right on our website. As I mentioned, he mentioned the topic of alexithymia. We did an entire episode on that, and so many other things that are relevant to adoptive and foster parenting. And if you go to our website, justicefororphansny.org, click on the adoption and foster care journey, you'll see the podcast. And if you click on the podcast, you will see an area where it has all of the bonus episodes with Dr. Jerrod Brown. There's dozens of them. And he takes us deep in the weeds on these types of topics. I've learned so much. And sometimes, I record the episode like we just did, and I've got to go back and listen again, and read the transcripts because there's just so much great content and so much to learn. So I hope that you will check those out, because we love to be able to equip you for your parenting journey, encourage you for your parenting journey. We've got lots of great resources. You heard the commercial about our Hope for the FASD Journey online support community. We actually have Dr. Brown on next month as a special guest every month. One of our meetings, the second Tuesday of the month, is always a VIP. We have a very important person guest that shares their message with us, and then we have an opportunity, our members ask questions. So it's like an interactive podcast. We do that once a month, and Dr. Brown is actually our guest in our support group for December. So if you're a member, you have that to look forward to. If you're not yet a member, I encourage you, if you suspect you are parenting a kiddo with a substance exposure, especially alcohol, whether they're diagnosed or not, this group is a huge blessing to so many families that participate in this group. It is faith-based. We pray for each other, especially weekly on our calls. So check that out. And of course, the FASD workshops that I do and parent training, make sure that you're checking those out as well. Because I'm on this journey with you. I want to be able to provide resources that will help you feel encouraged and equipped and supported, so that you can sustain your journey with hope and peace and some joy along the way. And make sure that you are checking out our website and our socials and this podcast for upcoming trainings. I will be resuming in January, offering the free 1-hour Intro to FASD online workshop that I like to offer. So whether you've taken that before or you want to take it, or maybe you have somebody who's working with your kiddos, the babysitter, the youth group leader, the children's ministry teacher, the school teacher, grandparent, anybody who may be spending time with your kids and you think that they could benefit from 1 hour of instruction on FASD, that free workshop is perfect for all of the above. I also typically offer an online 3-hour workshop on FASD using the Facets neurobehavioral model. And I tend to offer a couple times a year a deep dive where it's 5 3-hour sessions, again, where we dive into the neurobehavioral model as well. So lots of training available. Stay tuned to this podcast and to our website and our socials for the details on all upcoming training and our resources. Be sure to check out my blog. Also, you can find that on our Adoption and Foster Care Journey website page, where I blog, and sign up for my newsletter. And of course, subscribe to our socials and leave a review. Subscribe to this podcast. Leave a review. We love to be able to make sure that more foster and adoptive parents can access this podcast as a resource. So share it with your fellow adoptive and fostering friends. And as always, I am so grateful that you spent your valuable time with me today. I am grateful to have you along for the journey.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Adoption and Foster Care Journey podcast, brought to you by Justice for Orphans. We hope you were encouraged today. Please be sure to subscribe to this podcast and leave a review, and share it with your fellow foster and adoptive parent friends so they can be encouraged too. Be sure to find and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Justice for Orphans, and check out our website for vital resources at justicefororphansny.org.